I'm Claire Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton. And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club, the podcast where we tell you how to reach your higher self through our interpretation of the words of celebrities. And if you say, no, I want to figure it out for myself, you go do that, but you'll never meet God.
What's that I hear? A demon is inside of you, so you don't like this podcast and you gave it a bad review? Oh, yeah. You'll be dealt with.
Listen, you do you. In the next life, I'll be living large.
I'll be in the kingdom of God. And I just want to also caveat when Ashley says we read the books of celebrities. We take celebrity with quite a wide berth.
Yeah. If you've been married to someone who's stolen money from a celebrity, if you have a YouTube account, you might be a celebrity too. If your mom had a YouTube account and then forced your entire family into a cult, that's a celebrity to us. So today we're reading The House of My Mother by Shari Franke.
Is it Frank or Frankie?
I've been
saying Shari Franke.
You've been saying Frankie, so I started saying Frankie, but then just now looking at it, I said Frank.
Well, frankly, we don't know.
So it's Shari something, and she'd rather we don't talk about it because after this book, I believe she wants to be kept private. But she wrote her story in this book. She was the daughter of a YouTuber. And before we get into it, Claire, if you were to write a memoir about your week, how would you title the chapter?
Slow Descent to Hell.
Oh.
I think just last week I was like, I'm flying high. I'm working out. I'm feeling good. I'm hopping and bopping.
I believe you said the January blues aren't getting me this year because I'm vlogging.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Well, Lord knows I tried. Can I say I tried, right?
Well, you did try.
I was beat. I've just been so bummed out.
It's a real bummer to be in the wintertime.
And listen, nothing in my life is bad, but I'm making lentil soup, I'm crying. I'm hanging out with my friends, I'm crying. I'm going for a run outdoors, trying to get my vitamin D and my... What happens when you run? Endorphins? And I'm crying then too. But you know, if there's anything I learned from Persephone, my friend, it's gonna be summer again. And all my friends have to live through is another 3 months of me being pretty miserable.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, a treat for you guys. Ashley?
Yeah?
If you were a celebrity and you were to write a chapter about your week, how would it be?
I think it would be, I need to fold.
Laundry or emotionally?
Emotionally.
Or are you in a poker league that I don't know about? Oh my God. You know what would actually perk me up? To find out
that I had an online poker addiction.
Yeah, that you were like in psycho gambling debt. I mean, ultimately it would be a problem, but for a minute I'd be like, great gossip.
Interesting. I was out of town this weekend, and so I got to like not talk to Claire for 2 days and then have something to talk about.
I love it when Ashley does her side quests and she comes back to the dinner table with like mead and mead of gossip.
Mead and what's the other thing?
They drink
porridge?
Like beer. Yeah, I don't know. Are you imagining what I'm imagining? Like a taverna in like the 1600s?
Yeah, like a bowl of slop and a mug of slop.
Yeah, and that slop is stories about people I've never met.
Yum, yum, yum. Anyway, this is mostly just about winter running.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to conquer it this year. For years, I've just kind of completely stopped running in the winter, and then maybe, I'll do a little jaunt on the treadmill, but not much. And this last year, I got back into running a lot more, and I wanted to keep my mileage up. And so I thought this year I'll like buy the supplies and really figure out the key to running outdoors in the winter. The problem is I'm too cold. I can't move my legs fast enough when they're frozen like sticks.
Can I say something selfish?
Yeah.
I'm glad that winter is beating you too.
Winter always beats me.
I know, but it's just nice to remember that it's not just that I'm too weak, it's that we're too weak.
No, every year I deal with the 1 week where you think you're beating winter and I'm succumbing to it, and then we meet at the bottom. Every year I say, Ashley, don't get mad at Claire this week. Just let her think she's achieving something.
Because I'm trying for both of us, because I'm not fun to be around. But
I tried so hard to go running today because I thought it would help me, and I feel like my eyeballs got frozen.
Oh, well, they're wet.
Yeah, exactly. So then I was trying to run with my eyes closed, but I'll tell you what, Greenpoint, just because we got that bike lane doesn't mean things are safe. There's still cars out there. I haven't beaten them yet. I mean, I had literally like thermal running leggings on that I spent a good penny on. I had gloves. My hands were just iced to the brim like claws. It's too cold.
Amen. Well, you guys heard it here first. Too cold. The news is in.
So should we get into this week's book, A Hotbed of Gossip?
Now, can I ask you, were you a fan of the YouTube account 8 Passengers, which, by the way, sounds like a fucking horror movie? I guess I'm thinking of Stassi Schroeder's Dark Passenger, which I actually think in itself is a reference to a film that I have not seen. I've only seen the TV remake of when Stassi gets drunk and yells at her boyfriend.
I guess I would like to answer your question by asking you a question. Had you heard of the YouTube channel 8 Passengers?
I hadn't even heard of YouTube, really. I didn't know YouTube was for girls. I thought it was just for boys.
Okay, well, that's not really fair to say, considering the fight we got into 2 years ago when I said I didn't want to film this podcast because no one's on YouTube. And you said, Ashley, 1 billion people are on YouTube.
Yeah, 1 billion boys.
I said, I literally don't think anyone actually even uses it.
No, I know that somebody uses it, but it's not something I know personally. It's something I know strategically. My personal experience has not been that girls go on YouTube.
I don't know it personally or strategically. I almost tanked our business by refusing to use cameras.
And now I think we're at a whopping 14 subscribers on YouTube. So thank God you gave up that battle so we could find our success over there on the filmed platform. Hey, actually, I guess if you've been following us on TikTok, go over there now. And also, can I say something? Can I make a plug real quick?
Yeah.
I think that Apple Podcasts or Apple, the platform, the company, the miserly, greedy little old man from the sea I feel like I'm making no sense. Can I
No, I get it. The greedy man from the sea. Yeah. Everyone's following. Just keep going.
They're about to change it so that if you want to subscribe to our Patreon.
They already changed it.
Oh. Yeah, if you have an iPhone, you have to do it via web browser. Otherwise, they are going to add a 30% tax to take what's theirs. So if you still want our Patreon, which is $5 a month, which unlocks every episode we have ever done. We've done at least 5 episodes a month for now almost over 4 years.
Yeah.
It's there for $5 on a web browser, or it's there for, I think, $8 to $9 on the App Store. So just give yourself a break.
And you can still use it through the App Store, but do your subscribing on a desktop, millennial style.
Yeah.
Make purchases on the physical computer, and then you can download anything on your phone, but do the paperwork on the computer.
Yeah, this is very my mom core. My mom likes to use a desktop to look at my Facebook, and then she likes to use her phone to buy a new mortgage. She's like, little screen, big purchase, big screen, Instagram. So neither of us knew who Shari Franke was.
No.
And I just want to say something up top. I actually was so engrossed in this book. This is an incredible thriller. I cannot believe what this woman has been through. I'm very impressed by this book, and I'm really excited for you to hear the story.
I am really impressed by this gal.
I really feel like this is a story you're going to tell your friend at dinner tonight if you're going out to dinner with a friend. That being said, one of the great flaws of this book is that the author is named Shari, Shari, and she is 22, and the mom is named Ruby.
That's
in my mind,
mom name. Shari
in my
is a mom.
Yeah.
Ruby is a kid.
That's kind of hard to keep straight in this book. You're just why would a 15-year-old girl in 2012 be named Shari?
No,
17.
17 be named Shari.
It's pretty preposterous.
It's absolutely preposterous. No one can get a grip on it. I will say, I can't believe how much she's done with so little distance from the event.
Yes.
Because it's one that I think normally, even though it's very well done with such little distance, I think I would have been still sit on it for a minute. But she really couldn't, because she needs to put this out there to protect herself and her siblings and then just move forward.
So it starts out with the introduction, finally, August 30th, 2023. So this is an incredibly recent story. It's Wednesday. She's at college. She gets a phone call from her neighbor. They just say, Shari, the police are at your mother's house. She drives as quickly as she can. She's nervous as hell. She's saying it happened. They're dead. She drives as fast as she can. And there's the police, SWAT teaming the house, batter ramming down the door.
My father, once our anchor, had been banished, leaving Ruby and Jodie to rule unchallenged over my 4 youngest siblings who were still with them. So she is rushing to the house to find out what's happened to her 4 youngest siblings. And her mom and this woman, Jodie, are getting arrested.
Part 1, the Garden of Earthly Delights.
So she backs up to Ruby Griffith's story, born in Logan, Utah.
She's born in 1982. It's crazy to think that this woman, I think, is 10 years older than me.
It's crazy to think that she's the exact same age as Britney Spears.
I guess to me, that's not so crazy. They've both lived long, storied lives. They've both been around the block.
That's so true. So she was born into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We know it as Mormons.
For Ruby, motherhood wasn't just a future role. It was the pinnacle of her aspirations, the one thing she had always wanted for herself above all else. As I'm sure you're familiar with by now, or if not, now you know, in the Mormon religion, being a mother is really important. And she doesn't get into the details here, but I do think it has something to do with like whether or not you get to go to heaven.
Yeah.
Like you have to like populate your own planet or something.
So obviously to be a mother, she needs a husband. In 2000, she goes to Utah State University and meets Kevin.
They meet, and after 2 weeks, I guess Ruby was like a hot shot on campus. She's flirting with another boy. He freaks out and is like, no, I want to be with you. And she goes, great, so we're getting married. And within 2 weeks of meeting each other, they're engaged.
Within 3 months of meeting, they are married.
Kevin, Shari's father, was born in 1978. He was a senior at the time. He was a geological engineer. He was the youngest of 7 children by a long shot. He's like 12 years younger than his next oldest sibling. And so he was very much raised in a family that was kind of done having kids. They were nice, they were loving, but they weren't exactly Betty homemaker. There was a lot of microwaved foods. It sounds like he kind of slipped through the cracks.
Yeah. Kevin, the perpetual supporting actor to Ruby's lead role in her epic production of Ultimate Mother. On December 28th, 2000, 3 months after their first meeting, Ruby and Kevin strode towards the temple, ready to be eternally sealed in the eyes of God.
Ruby's entire self-worth was built on exceptionalism, so if she couldn't be extraordinary, then what was the point? There it was, Ruby's fairy tale moment came to life. As the vows left her lips, she felt the happily ever after unfurling before her like a red carpet. Finally, her life was about to begin.
So March 3rd, 2003, Shari is born, the oldest of 6. From the start, it seemed my childhood was destined to be a fight for survival. So she had some health problems when she was a baby.
Ruby doesn't believe in comforting babies. And also, Ruby cries a lot. She had tears for every occasion, joy, sorrow, boredom. It didn't matter. Ruby wept through it all, a woman perpetually at odds with her own equilibrium.
Perhaps that's why she wanted so many children, a set of Russian nesting dolls, each one slightly smaller than the last to absorb the tsunami of raging emotions.
So she keeps having children about every 2 years. In 2005, Chad's born. 2007, a third girl. And then she keeps going down the line. It seems like, right, just about every 2 years, she keeps having a kid and then they tap out at 6. She only names Chad in this book, Shari. So there's Shari, who's the oldest daughter, and then there's Chad, who's the oldest son. No other child gets named, and this is on purpose in order to protect them. She goes, I'm not going to tell their stories. They're obviously a part of my story because they were my siblings. But she gives very little detail about her siblings, what they went through, and doesn't even use their names. It's just that they exist.
So it's Ruby, Chad, and then the 4 younger siblings are just kind of referred to in this book as the youngest siblings who she expresses a lot of concern for, and they're really her driving force through a lot of this, but that's all the information we have.
Ruby, after her second child, gets into the mommy blogging game, which at the time, it was like early 2000s. It was just creeping up. She had a blog called Good Lookin' Home Cookin', which Ruby was like, it was so fake. She would show all these gorgeous things she was cooking, but she wasn't even really cooking them for us. She was just cooking them for photos.
This I found so interesting. In my church, we were encouraged to document our lives meticulously, creating a roadmap for future generations to understand their roots. And it seemed as though the internet was just an extension of that, another way to do the Lord's work. So I feel like now that I think about it, so many early blogs that all of us had heard of, so many early YouTube families, so much of that is from like LDS.
Well, I had always like heard that the reason that Mormon mommy bloggers are such a force to be reckoned with is because it does align with their culture in the sense that they very much believe in proselytization. And like, that's the ballerina farm accusation. That's the Nara Smith accusation, that this is them actually doing quote unquote missions in this like weird digital way.
Yeah, she calls it digital missionary, like passive digital missionary work.
So I'd always heard that that was a part of their culture. Then also because of the traditional gender roles, that if a woman did have ambition, the only way that she could really enact that ambition was to be the ultimate capitalist mom online, to like show off what a good mom she is in this very Martha Stewart way. But I had never heard this third component of it, that there's actually in the Mormon church an emphasis on self-documenting. Like when you think about those 3 pillars, I'm like, of course, every mommy blogger is a Mormon. And how is Mom Talk going to survive this?
How is Mom Talk going to survive? We're doing it for something, and that's Mom Talk. Okay, so one thing that I found so interesting when I was reading this book is I kept thinking back to this Mormon blogger that I was like obsessed with like 12 years ago. She's like a running mom blogger, and I didn't even realize she was Mormon for a really long time until all of a sudden one day she like met this guy and was married 3 months later in like full Mormon garb, and I was like, oh my God, I've been reading her running race recaps for like 2 years. And then she looks exactly like Shari Franke, or not Shari Franke, sorry, Ruby Franke.
Isn't it confusing?
It is so confusing.
I'm sorry, Shari Franke is a mom. Ruby Franke is a little baby.
And I hadn't thought about this woman in so long, and reading this book made me think about her a lot. And then I Googled Ruby Franke to see what she looked like, and they are identical. And so then I lost an hour last night to trying to figure out if they're related, because I can't figure out if all Mormon mommy bloggers look the same, or if all Mormon mommy bloggers are legally cousins, or if there's just one face over there.
I guess it scares me because I feel like
all 3.
It's my face.
It's not your face, Claire.
I kept looking at Shari and being like, is that me?
And I say they all have much longer teeth than you.
She says from the time she was a little girl, she had like horrible pains in her stomach. And when she would go tell her mom would be like, shut up. We already talked about this. You're making it up. I know now, of course, that the pain in my stomach was much more than childish complaint. It was a physical response to my anxiety. She felt from a young age, my mommy isn't very nice to me. She would get screamed at. She would get yelled at. Her mom was big on teaching children consequences and independence.
So she was also forced to take piano lessons. And her first real memory acknowledging her mom's rage is when her piano teacher doesn't want her to move on to the next piano piece. And she has kind of a meltdown about what her mom will say about that. And her piano teacher sees it and responds to it and is like, actually, yeah, let's move on to a new thing. But she just had this constant dread of how everything she did was in response to the way her mom might overreact to it.
At 5, I knew my place instinctively, be pliable, be obedient, shape and mold myself into whatever form would earn Ruby's conditional affection. I was a plant straining towards the sun, contorting myself into unnatural shapes just to try to catch a ray of her approval.
When one of her younger sisters was born, she saw Ruby and Ruby's mom being very friendly with each other and just like having a great time, mother and daughter laughing. And she's like, how could I be friendly with my mom and laugh together? And she asks her mom, and her mom was like, yeah, when you have a baby, we can be friends. And it like was really heartbreaking to see the terminology written out. Like, how can I be friends with my mom? Like, how can I? Because all she wanted was her mom to like her.
Yeah. As soon as her children could toddle, Ruby enlisted us as her pint-sized cleaning crew. Ruby's philosophy was simple. Everyone contributes, everyone stays busy.
Money was tight, but Kevin's career as a geotechnical engineer was on the rise. Kevin, the dad, is mentioned so sparsely through the first huge part of this book. I almost can't believe it. Even before the blogging, even before everything really went haywire, he is really just like a shadow of a presence.
So when she's 8 years old, they move into their first attached house. They're living in Springfield or something. Springville.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Springville in Utah. And they are mostly a normal family, just albeit one with a mother who has like anger issues. She also around this time gets baptized when she's 8 years old. And she says, as I've submerged beneath the surface, I felt a rush of peace. I was safe now, protected by God and my faith, no matter what else happened around me. For what were Ruby's tantrums and tirades compared to eternal truths of the gospel?
She becomes very obsessed with religion.
Specifically, Joseph Smith. She loves him.
She loves it. I believe to this day.
She's quite religious.
Yeah. My fascination with religion spilled over to obsession. She like wants to just be reading scriptures instead of even having to do chores. Like she's mad that she has to interrupt religious study for anything.
At the same time, her mother's sisters, she has 3 sisters, are all starting YouTube channels and starting to make money from it. And when she considers whether or not her own mother will start a YouTube channel, she says, no, she probably wouldn't want people to see how angry she is all the time.
This is another line that I found very heartbreaking when she's talking about setting the table and her mom screams at her because she puts the forks on the wrong side. Kevin's eyes flickered to mine with a sympathetic glimmer. I'd always felt a strong kinship with him, like we were shipmates sailing the stormy waters side by side. Kinship?
Like you're 5 and he's an adult man.
Well, he's your dad. He is your literal kin. Like, what do you mean you feel a strong kinship?
She says it a couple times. She's like, well, now we're equals in trauma. And I'm like, well, no, because, you know, He had a job in the title of the car, an agency, and you were quite literally a minor.
Yeah. He was a hero too, a man who had taken a thankless task of being the nice guy in our family. Okay.
Sometimes being a nice guy isn't nice enough. Sometimes you have to like stop abuse. She remembers her little brother Chad playing a prank and cutting some of Sherry's hair. Ruby, who loved Sherry's long brown hair, freaks out and as a punishment shaves like a reverse mohawk down his head and then hits him and then yells at Sherry for trying to defend him. And she's like, everyone needs to suffer the consequences of their own actions.
Our house seemed to repel social gatherings by its very nature. The cramped spaces, the constant presence of siblings, and Ruby's perpetual state of stress created an atmosphere that seemed naturally to discourage visitors.
It wasn't that I lacked friends entirely, but rather that the thought of merging my school life and my home life filled me with a sense of dread I couldn't quite articulate.
It feels like she always kind of has other people. Like she always has a friend from school, but there are always people that she can't let in. And it's kind of a revolving person because she breaks off friendships when she reveals too much.
She also talks again about how in LDS they're encouraged to record keep. So she has tons of journals and she has excerpts from journals throughout this book. And I do wonder if they're excerpts from real journals or if they're just a rhetoric device.
Yeah.
For example, she says, Mom and Dad pulled me into their room tonight. They said that all of my friend problems in school were my fault. They said I'm not a fun person to be around and nobody gets me, which may be true. They said it seems like I just try on purpose to annoy my family, but the truth is I just don't enjoy being around them. Ruby and Kevin are the ones who annoy me.
Yeah, I guess because at this age, would she have been calling them Ruby and Kevin?
Yeah. I yearned for my mother's guidance, her support, her friendship during this insecure time of puberty, but Ruby maintained a strict emotional distance.
She's a huge reader.
Mm-hmm. She like relates to Anne Frank, which I'm like, okay, well, that's intense. And she says it kind of alienates her from the other kids. She's always like seeking out these really horrible stories because that's who she relates to. And the other kids are like, you're kind of a bummer.
Yeah, she's like a bit of a righteous kid. And at some points, it's more of an issue in school than other points. It manifests in various ways, but like a pretty constant theme is her being like, we're not being taught the right things. We don't have a good grasp on the Holocaust.
So around this time, her aunts are starting these YouTube channels and she's like, and they are thriving. After 2.5 years, one of them hit 1,000 subscribers, which meant they could monetize. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, I'm not going to poo-poo anybody's yum, but I wouldn't say that's thriving. So Ruby decides, you know what? I'm going to get in the game too. In January 2015, Ruby's vision materialized with the official launch of 8 Passengers on YouTube.
In many ways, family vlogging is a very LDS-aligned pursuit, a natural extension of our traditional practices. It offers a modern form of bearing testimony, keeping personal family records, while simultaneously engaging in passive missionary work.
Vlogs mean church members can share their faith, values, and daily lives with a global audience, potentially attracting interest in the church and its teachings. In a way, the synergy between YouTube and LDS families seems almost predestined.
Fitting perfectly with the church's desire to be in the world but not of the world, allowing members to engage with modern culture while maintaining our distinct values and beliefs. That is also so interesting, I think, about the perspective.
Like, I'm in your home, but you're not in mine.
Yes. Like, I can project whatever I want out to you, and if I never read a comment, then I'm never a part of it.
She says it's funny because at the time, all of these kind of crazy, scandalous headlines were going viral. Who would have known there was such an appetite for wholesome culture, which is what my family was providing. Wholesome, family-centered content.
One day we were a regular family going about our lives. The next there was a janky camera constantly pointed in our direction, documenting our every move for the consumption of strangers on the internet.
So in January 2015, she posts her first video. Within 6 months or something, she hits 10K. I was beginning to feel like a sideshow freak. Step right up and witness Sherry, the amazingly awkward adolescent, in all her cringe-worthy glory. Of course, since Sherry is the oldest and a girl, her puberty is like the star of the show. If she gets a pimple, it's on camera. If she feels awkward in her body, all conversations are happening on camera. She did not want to deal with this omnipresent producer that was her mother.
As our YouTube channel evolved, so did our home. Ruby invested heavily in remodeling every change designed to please the camera's eye. Goodbye, ugly yellow walls. Hello, stark white and board batten. This is another thing that I find so interesting of like how much of the 2000s beige core style trend is like evolved from people creating like home sets.
Yeah, that's really true. Interesting. Because like the people we were looking at online were people who were filming, and the people who were filming needed to create a home that would film well.
Yeah.
She says, thankfully I found a silver lining in this heinous new situation, leverage. I figured out that if I wanted something from Ruby, a later bedtime, a new outfit, or permission to hang out with friends, my best bet was to ask her while the camera was rolling. It was a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal. Ruby wanted me to be happy, smiling co-star. It was going to cost her. And then slowly their lives start being taken over because Ruby starts being like, hey, by the way, if you want money to go to the mall, I'll give it to you, but you have to film it because then it's like tax write-off. So the situation is like, you could go to the movies with your friends, and if you film in the car, then we can write off the gas. Everything becomes a tax write-off. And if you're willing to film it, I'll give you the company credit card. And then on top of that, these were people who were like budgeting to get by, 8 passengers living on 1 teacher's salary. And now, in addition to having all this new income, they're getting tons of product. This is the heyday of YouTube advertisers. She goes, at one point, we used to like share stuff, but some days there were so many gifts that we couldn't open them all. Boxes would sit for days in the hallway unopened. So they're getting a lot of fun stuff. You know what I mean? They're getting stuff. They're getting to go on vacations. And she says, what are the lasting repercussions of growing up on camera without any say in the matter? How does that constant exposure shape a child's sense of self, their future relationships, their very understanding of privacy? And what does consent really look like when you're a child too afraid to say no? Personally, I mourn the precious formative years spent in service to someone else's vision. Ruby might claim her kids were always on board, but the truth is we never really had a choice in the matter.
This is, I think, pretty in line with what we talk about all the time with child stars in general. Just the idea that a child could ask for anything this life-changing. To say that a kid is on board with an adult's decision, of course they are. You're the adult. You're the decision maker. You know what I mean? What's a fucking 11-year-old going to say? I actually think it might be harmful to my personal development if you start putting me in your YouTube vlogs when I'm this young.
Yeah, if I have to question if people want to be my friends or if they just think they're going to get a shout out online. She also says that one of the problems is as her mom became more famous online and was being like revered as being a perfect mother, it kind of emboldened her abuse. It fed her narcissism and made her say, see, I am perfect. I can do no wrong, which allowed her to become even more abusive. It also gave her like a thing that she wouldn't give up. You know what I mean? It gave her a goal. Like she'll do whatever it takes to put out one more video.
Towards the end of 8th grade, when I was 14, I started my own YouTube channel for one reason, money. So she asked her mom for a shout out on the family channel. And her mom was like, no shortcuts. If you want to build a channel the way I built a channel.
Which is crazy because she built a channel off the backs of her children. And also you're a mom. Give them a fucking shout out. So she was like, that's fine. So she builds her own channel and she uses her siblings. I posted twice a week.
I feel so bad that she has so much regret over putting her siblings in her videos. Because like
why would she know any better? She was being raised by a woman who was saying, this is what you do.
Exactly. Like, I understand now looking back, being like, oh, if I had the information I had now, that's not what I would have done. But you were a 14-year-old.
I exploited my own siblings doing shaving videos with my sisters and talking about periods because I knew it would get views. The guilt eats at me now, but back then, I was just following the blueprint. This is what people like. This is what makes money. She goes to school.
She ends up getting in with the popular group because she's internet famous.
They weren't interested in me, Shari the person, but in Shari the internet celebrity, a potential boost to their own online presence. Still, it felt nice to be noticed and included for once.
Dude, I feel so glad that we didn't grow up in this era of
where like a random kid in your school could be internet famous.
Or even just like the idea of caring about having followers really online. Yeah. Even though there were people who were MySpace famous or whatever, I just don't think that really bled over into real life in any tangible way at all.
Or they were just so few and in between.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like who was MySpace famous? Tilla Tequila?
Yeah.
You didn't know her. She didn't go to North Brooklyn High.
I knew this one girl that I worked at a day camp with, and she was like MySpace friends with a bunch of guys in bands. And we were just like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Like she might have been MySpace famous. I don't know. It's just like not how you talked about stuff. And you didn't care how many Instagram followers someone had.
Well, back in the day, like 3,000 followers seemed like a fucking lot. Like if you had anything that was like more than a factor of 4 or 5 times who you followed, that felt like crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this with the bikini girls, Tosh Oakley, when she was like, I got up to 50,000 followers and I was getting 100 and more likes a day. And I was like, and you built $1 billion business off that?
I feel like it was cool because remember how it would say everyone's name until you got to like,
oh my God, if you hit 11
likes.
And like the goal was to hope you got to 11.
So it would show a number instead of a list of names.
Oh my God, I actually recently put up an old Instagram photo screenshot because I wanted to show this cat that I had as a baby that I had kind of like teased on the Patreon.
Such a fat cat.
And when I took the screenshot, I noticed that I had like liked my own Instagram. And I immediately went back to, I bet I was trying to hit 11. And back in the day, that was such a humiliating thing to get caught doing. But I just said, Claire, leave it. You don't care. Stay true to who you were back then. Back then, you were a girl who would desperately try to hit 11 likes. And it's, oh my God, it's filtered. It's very authentically like 2011.
I love it.
So she says it's funny because the only time her mom ever worried about her was like less about being a good parent and more about the brand management of the household. And so she actually meets this boy, Jake, who's like a huge crush of hers, and they go out, and
Jake's dad has tattoos.
yeah, so they're not allowed to talk. And she's just like, my mom has to protect me from boys. But really, is it because she's worried about me, or is it because she like wants to maintain a wholesome image?
Her mom had to check everything she posted until she was 18 years old. And so she does say Ruby was very vigilant about any post that could in any way be sexualized, which I guess is like, at least there was one thing.
Ruby's laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. Shari, we're not normal. We're public figures. Every move we make, every word we say directly impacts our income. Can you try and wrap your head around it? Ruby gets caught having Snapchat on her phone that she used to text this boy, Jake. Imagine she was talking to Drake.
She could have been. I'll tell you what, she was the right age.
A minor. Anyway, so she loses her smartphone, which I guess is normal teen stuff, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't have a smartphone until I was like 20.
She remembers sitting down at her desk and writing, I don't think my mother loves me. Why didn't my mother love me was the question. Had I done something to repel her, to drive her away? Did I not smile enough? Was I too sarcastic, too brainy, too self-absorbed? Did I accidentally roll my eyes at her?
My obedience was born not out of adoration, but out of fear. If only they knew the real me, I thought. The me who dreamed of life far away from the circus. But no, all they saw was Ruby's obedient little puppet dancing on her strings.
This was because she would get like adults commenting on her mom's YouTube saying, ugh, Shari is such a kiss ass. She's always running out her siblings and trying to be Ruby's favorite. It's so smug. And this is why it's so fucked up to put your kids online. Because whether or not you would judge somebody else's child, people are out there judging children. And it's so fucked to have an adolescent or child have to see what strangers online are thinking about them. It's enough to know what you think about yourself. It's enough to go to 7th grade and wonder what the girl next to you at the other desk thinks about you. To have adults online be bullying you can destroy you.
Insane.
Something I never, ever stopped thinking about was this post a mommy blogger put up one time where she was like crying and being like, I have 3 kids and 2 of them get way more likes than my older one. What am I supposed to tell my older one when he like grows up and realizes he gets the fewest likes out of all of the kids? How is that supposed to make him feel? I was like yelling at her followers for not liking his photo enough. And I was like, bitch, get your kid offline. This is exactly why you shouldn't have kids online. Why are you setting up a popularity contest that your kid can easily see who is the favorite? It's not their fault. It's your fault.
I don't know, man.
I can't believe I exposed my child to online criticism. Haven't you considered how that could make him feel?
You should be treating my kids equally so that I can treat my kids equally. She's like very aware that the way she feels isn't, I don't want to say normal, but like she's aware that she is feeling extremely depressed. She knows that the way she feels isn't how she's supposed to feel.
She learns about like depression one year. She goes, there I recognize myself, hopelessness, self-loathing, and sometimes desire to just end it all. I never told anyone about those feelings before, but now that I knew they had a name, I felt compelled to say it out loud.
So she texts her dad, I'm depressed and I don't know if I want to live anymore. And then he talks to Ruby and Ruby is like, you'll be fine.
And she's scared. Her first thought is like, why did I tell my dad? My dad's going to tell my mom and I'm going to get in trouble.
So she begs to go to therapy. And finally, her dad puts his foot down and is like, no, she should be allowed to go to therapy.
She's grateful to be allowed to open up to this woman. And she's slow and steady about it because she doesn't want to betray too much. But she finally has someone, an adult she can talk to.
It's not even just her dad who agrees that she should go to therapy. She's always talking to her bishop. And her bishop is like, bro, you need therapy.
Dude, I really feel like it's a bad sign when the Mormon church is like, that sounds fucked up.
You need to talk to somebody about this.
This is not a problem God can solve. You may need help.
So because her dad and her bishop are like, get this girl in therapy, she's allowed to get a therapist.
Meanwhile, they're making a ton of money off of YouTube. They get a new van. They get a new house. We were famous influencers now. Our everyday lives a source of entertainment for millions. And she has like an example of a post she makes with her mom where her mom asks to wax her eyebrows and then wax off half an eyebrow. And I am like, that is fucked up. That's like a fucked up thing to do to a teenager for content.
Yeah.
The video was called Shari, I'm So Sorry, with a thumbnail of me mid-ugly cry, and it racked up hundreds of thousands of views. So then she gets home one day and her parents are like, we need to talk. We're pulling you out of school. At the end of the semester, you'll be transferring to Chad's school. And it's because they found out that she had like a little boyfriend, Jake.
She has a full-blown panic attack about losing this part of her life.
She says, the students at your junior high are a bad influence on you. You can't be around them. You're going to this new school. A familiar sense of powerlessness washes over me. Once again, my life was being reshaped without my consent. My choices stripped away, this time in the name of safety.
So she goes to therapy and it takes her a while. Like she's really afraid to open up, but it starts with her being able to talk about how much she doesn't like piano. She realizes her piano lessons are a great source of stress because it really is just her mom yelling at her. And so her therapist encourages her to talk to her mom and say that she doesn't want to do piano. And the next week, she's not going back to therapy.
Yeah, her mom comes in and goes, hey, guess what? Turns out you're cured. The doctor says you're just a drama queen who's making it up, so you don't have to go back anymore. You're fine. And immediately she goes, oh, this is the punishment I get for getting out of piano. I'm now not allowed to go to therapy anymore. My little therapy experiment was over. In this family, the only safe emotion was no emotion at all. That same month I started my new school, September 2017, Ruby hit a huge milestone. Her subscriber base had reached 1 million 2.5 years after launching her channel. I mean, that is fucking huge.
It's insane.
The content couldn't stop. She goes, if I stayed home from school because I was sick, her mom was in the bathroom with her videoing her puking. If she goes to the doctor,
she was in urgent care and she would smile for the camera and Ruby was like, don't smile, you're in urgent care, look distraught.
She's also doing normal stuff like kissing boys. And of course, the Mormon part of her feels deeply guilty, but she's like trying anything she can to rebel, to feel companionship, to make a friend.
She's starting to make sillier videos on her channel and like just really enjoying the creative expression. And for her birthday, her mom gifts her a tripod and a shout out to her channel from the family channel to help her get more subscribers.
And after that, she goes, by the way, I'm taking 10% off the top for management fees. I nodded, not fully grasping the mom tax concept. What do you mean? You really think you would have ever started a YouTube channel, let alone a successful one, without my help? You owe me, Shari. Business is business.
I felt a knot form in my stomach. On one hand, mom had a point. Her influence had undeniably boosted my channel. On the other hand, it felt like she was cashing in on my hard work. But what could I do about it? Nothing. As if, would the mom have a channel without Shari?
Meanwhile, she is having more and more panic attacks. She's really struggling emotionally and socially because of like how angry and volatile her life at home is and how she feels so trapped and contained. She has one teacher at school, Mr. Heyman. She's friends with his kids and she's able to open up to him a little bit about how hard life with her parents is. And he just says, I had no idea. This must be incredibly difficult for you. Those simple words, that acknowledgement felt like a key unlocking something inside me. Mr. Heyman listened patiently as I poured out my heart, nodding encouragingly, his brow furrowed with empathy. He didn't try to offer quick solutions or dismiss my feelings. He just listened.
So Chad ends up getting expelled from school for playing pranks.
I guess that little haircut in his early days was like his true self.
Yeah, exactly.
But also she's like, I think this is very true to birth order. Shari responded to the abuse and the control by becoming a people pleaser and trying as hard as she can to like fulfill her duty as a daughter and be godly. Chad is acting out as much as possible. She gives this example of one of their biggest ever collabs is they get to go to Universal Studios for free. They get to go early before the park opens so they can get content with the whole family in an empty park. Chad, ever the rebel, wasn't about to let Ruby's parental decree keep him down. He like is pulling gargoyle faces constantly. He's making farts. I don't know. I made that part up.
Okay, unconfirmed whether or not Chad was farting.
Making farts.
Making farts.
I guess the thing is I'm a bit out of the loop out of how a 15-year-old Mormon boy would rebel against his mommy vlogger. I just like can't super imagine it. But in my head,
he's making farts.
I guess when you write pulling gargoyle faces, I really am at a loss. I'm like, and that was so bad it couldn't go in the realistic, wholesome family video. To me, to have an older brother who's making a funny face in the family picture is like the most wholesome, normal shit possible. Anything more perfect than that is uncanny and creepy.
Yeah, I think there's a good like 9-year period where there is not one normal photo of me and my brother.
There was a good 2-year period in my own life where I learned to do that thing where you pull down your face with only the whites of your eyes show. And I'm like that in like 3 school pictures, like class pictures.
Me and my brother used to only smile for photos by like, we would be like, show your molars and be like.
That's why I say making farts. Because I'm trying to think like what other crazy thing might a 15-year-old boy be doing that gets him sent back to the hotel and like exiled from the family.
And then sent to wilderness prison school.
Okay, well that comes next. So then he sneaks out of the hotel so he can like ride rides. And yeah, and then the next step is
wilderness prison school.
So their parents are freaking out because they were like, we've never heard of such demon behavior.
Gargoyle faces. Claire just started a rumor that he was making farts, and we don't know if it's true, but God forbid if it is. So then they were like, what can we do? And this one person they knew was like, oh, we know this lady named Jodie, and she is a real fixer.
She is a lifestyle helper. I guess, what is it called? A life coach?
A life coach.
And a mental health professional who is technically not just unlicensed, but dislicensed.
Yeah. Her name is Jodie Hildebrandt. And her first solution was to send Chad to wilderness prison school.
Shout out Paris Hilton. Shout out actually me when I was 12. I was big. I will say. And I
wanted your brother to go to wilderness prison school.
So badly. And my mom would always say, Claire, I'm not fucking doing that. And then I'd always say, well, at least send him to military school. And she'd go, what do you know about military school? And I'd say, Cadet Kelly. It straightened that idiot out.
What if Thomas went to military school and learned how to do rhythmic gymnastics?
I would have been jealous. I would have said, joke's on me. I can't twirl a gun for shit. Imagine being able to safely dance with a gun. I don't even know that I could safely hold a gun.
I don't think you could.
I wouldn't even want to try. But anyway, I will say, I don't often give my mom credit.
In the
looking back, I go, I guess that was a pretty good call on your part.
Thomas turned out
she'd
fine.
Always go, I'm not having my son kidnapped in the middle of the night. And I'd be like, it's the only way to teach him responsibility.
That's funny.
I better have perfect kids. Otherwise, I'm not owe my parents an apology, and I don't want to give it. Fingers crossed, I have it all figured out.
Jodie Hildebrandt is a life coach with a program called Connections. CONNE capital
Cut to
X.
the chase, Ashley.
IONS.
Just tell him about the X.
Connections.
I wonder if she lost her website to that girl who gives out college credit.
Connections.
It's Connections for free. I guess that's the education connection.
Education connection. Yeah. Jodie seems to command a lot of respect, the friend said. Maybe she'll be a good therapist for Chad given his spirited nature.
So she was a big deal in the LDS community because she promised that she could help people overcome everything from porn addiction to distorted thinking. And she preached a philosophy based on 3 core principles. Are you guys listening? Write this down because you may want to fix your souls. I don't know. If you want to get into heaven, it's on you. Here's the principles. 1, impeccable honesty. 2, rigorous personal responsibility. And 3, vulnerable humility.
I'll see you in hell.
My hot take is if you have that many adjectives, it's not actually just 3.
Yeah.
Like, what if I was like, I believe in 3 chores a day? Cleaning, running, folding laundry, cooking, and then gardening, roofing. The last one is where you garden the lawn and then you retile the roof. That's 1.
You don't get a sticker unless you've garden roofed. I looked up Jodie online and something about her rhetoric made me uneasy. Even her photo was off-putting.
You guys, I have to tell you about this lady. The idea that you would think she could help you with your kids is pretty preposterous. So first of all, she's like a big believer that she can fix your kid for just like $15K. No big deal. So that was her first thing, is send him to this wilderness camp. It's 7 weeks, $15K. And then
$14K.
Yeah, but you have to imagine like
taxes.
A bus ticket and taxes and a tip. I'm sure you're tipping the wilderness. You're saying thank you to the deer with the big antlers for really bullying my child into submission.
Totally, totally. Thank you, hole in the ground, for letting my son dig you.
Here's her backstory. She was the 6th of 7 kids born to a fighter pilot dad and a stay-at-home mom. The family motto was a You're a Hildebrandt, go hard or go home. According to Jodie, her mom lost a baby boy and was emotionally distant and didn't spend much time with her. Jodie said her dad, while also emotionally closed off, taught her to work hard and not trust people. Growing up in the desert, Jodie said she was more comfortable around animals than humans, and that having grown up with very little affection, she admitted to finding the sight of tenderness between parents and children disturbing.
Oof. She
has also publicly shared that she was sexually abused by a 15-year-old neighbor when she was 2 to 5, and then again by a 16-year-old who lived nearby when she was 7 to 9. In 1999, at 26, her ex-husband filed for a divorce, and when she got full custody of her children, they both left her and have never spoken to her. She also became a licensed mental health professional in 2005.
Guided by heavenly instruction and inspired invitations, she devised a specialized coaching program meant to foster the things she never had growing up: connection. Hence, Connections.
Can I say, to say that you find tenderness between parent and child disturbing?
Yeesh.
You could say it's just not for me, but to say it's disturbing and that's how I'm going to fix your son.
That's disturbing. So she felt Chad needed basic maturity skills. This is a chance for a reset. So Chad gets sent to wilderness camp. Kevin, I guess in later questioning, says he disagreed with this decision at the time, but fell in line. I don't believe Kevin's ever disagreed with anything.
Meanwhile, Jodie Hildebrand is like their new life coach. And so they have all of these exercises that they're supposed to do. Like you're supposed to stand in front of the mirror and try to find the light in your own eyes. And unfortunately, poor Shari's like, I could never find it.
Like any good life coach, she offers a number of courses and workshops that cost all of your money. However much money you have, that's how much they cost.
She also has like a wake of upset people in her past. Everywhere she goes, her big move is to recognize that the husband is a disturbed person. And the best way to fix a disturbance in your soul is to exile yourself from your family and your wife. And so she has this like interesting community of women whose husbands have all left and are like forced to be alone.
They were not left by their husbands. They invited their husbands to leave.
And she says it takes at a minimum 6 months to prove that you've fixed yourself. And things that are considered a disturbance of the soul can be like, if you notice somebody's attractive, that's cheating and that's sick. If you look at a hot person's Instagram, that's pornography, that's sick.
If you speak to your female coworker, that's disturbing.
So what it's created is this like gal pal.
Jodie's gay.
No. Can I say, you know what was funny? As I was reading this and I was like, this is so interesting to me because you don't often see like the matriarch side of things. So I was like, what is she going to do with all these ladies?
Really? You weren't reading this being like, Jodie's gay?
No. I guess I was like, isn't it funny that man or woman, when you're the head of the cult, all you want to do is like isolate the women? What is she even going to do with them?
That's funny.
I'm compet.
I was reading this being like, oh, yeah, Jodie's like, why do you guys have these stupid men in your lives?
Okay, well, there's this line where she's like, when Kevin first went to one of these meetings, he was like, wow, it feels pretty man-hatey in here, but I respect a lot of these gals, so let's keep it up. And I was like, wow, feminist cult. Anything? I go, feminist Mormon cult. Anything's possible. No, they're just being gay predatored. I hadn't even considered a lesbian could be a predator. I forgot. It's 2025, Claire. Anybody can be a predator now.
Okay, so Chad comes back from the desert. He's like, whatever, it was chill. We went hiking, blurb. But then he's still kind of a bitch.
And I wonder when they say being kind of a bitch, what that even means.
Nobody knows what it means.
Because like they'll look at you and be like, have you had any thoughts today? And you're like, yes. And they're like, huh, hubris. You're thinking? You're thinking, did God ask you to think? And you could be like, oh yeah. They'd be like, so you think you know God? And you'd be like, no. And they'd be like, so God didn't ask you to think and you're thinking without his permission. You're like, I know. And they're like, to the corner.
So Chad comes back. He's going to have one-on-one sessions with Jodie. And Shari takes him aside and is like, I think Jodie's kind of a freak. Unfortunately, Chad's kind of a freak. And Chad reports to the parents that Shari thinks Jodie is a freak. And they are like, Shari, go fuck yourself.
They say, well, now you have to talk to her more because she's going to get the devil out of you. But mom, she had her license suspended. Her own kids don't speak to her. Her kids couldn't handle the truth. She's been called by God to help people. Ruby's eyes gleamed with the fervor of a true believer. She was sold on Jodie, hook, line, and sinker.
Oof. My autonomy was tenuous and hinged on Ruby's unpredictable moods. So she gets a car, but there's a lot of conditions attached.
It's so funny for me because I think like the culture of having a car, it's just so different for me as somebody who has never lived somewhere not walkable.
Well, aren't you privileged?
I am, but I am like, it's so funny because to me, to have a car at all, to be like, could you believe my mom would just take my car? And I was like, well, who even gets to have a car? I'm 32 years old. I've never even seen a car.
I wish I'd never seen a car.
But I know that, like, I guess if you live in Utah, like, if you don't have a car, you really can't function.
I mean, even where I grew up, I luckily had neighbors I was friends with, but you can't really get anywhere. Like Starbucks from my parents' house is like a mile and a half.
Perfect walk.
Anyway.
So Jodie's whole thing, Connection's whole thing is the concepts of truth and distortion. The program was as expensive as it was extensive. The 6-week team leadership training, which included 6 90-minute sessions, was $5,000. And then there was like, you could become a leader and that cost $15,000. She had this giant $5 million house where I guess she lived with nobody because her kids wouldn't speak to her and her husband had divorced her.
Jodie's playbook focused on isolation and control. That's so crazy that it's called Connections.
Basically, like any good cult, we've read them all. They were like, anybody who doesn't believe me is a demon and you have to cut them out or else you'll never be connected to other people.
Totally. Connections ticked all the boxes. We weren't being physically relocated to some sort of remote compound, but we didn't need to be. Our dedicated enclave within Utah was a perfect setup for someone like Jodie, a ready-made, isolated community ripe for manipulation.
Something really interesting about this book I find, because Shari is really incredible to me in that she was born into this nonsense and it seems like she stood pretty strong against the brainwashing. And she can see that some correlation between what Jodie was doing and like the Mormon church, for example. And I think she even says at one point, growing up LDS really primes you to be like looking for a leader who knows the truth. And she recognizes how many like LDS people end up doomsday preppers and like apocalypse training and stuff. And then she later even recognizes that like all human leaders of any church group are susceptible to moral failings, but she's still very religious.
She doesn't harken back to like a human leader.
Mm-hmm.
She's always calling back to God.
Yeah, like her personal conversations with God, which is very strong. I mean, it's kind of incredible that she is able to maintain a healthy skepticism.
Yeah. So before long, Ruby is a certified Connections life coach.
And in Jodie's rigid world, innocence was rare. Those deemed distorted, usually husbands, were told to abandon the families to work on themselves alone. Jodie seemed to specialize in guiding wives to distance themselves from their husbands. Again, straight stuff. I was just like, dang, ladies, you got the power now. Women doing it for themselves. Work, mama.
Connections wasn't introducing Ruby to a new way of thinking. It was giving her the vocabulary and pseudoscientific backing to justify what she'd been doing all along. Jodie's system simply slapped a fancy label on the emotional starvation diet and called it therapy. So Ruby's whole MO of not babying her babies was the Connections MO also. But now she had a way to be like, in order to help my children seek truth, I have to not love them.
Ruby didn't announce Jodie's arrival or her newfound interest in Connections with any fanfare on 8 passengers. Instead, the shift was subtle, a slow integration of new ideas and terminology into her existing content.
Her followers, already primed to trust her advice, began to show interest in the new ideas, even if they couldn't see how Connections was already destroying our family.
So around this time, Jodie says that Chad's not improving fast enough, so he's forced to be pulled from all sports. Chad was not a great student, but he was an excellent athlete, and he had been trying to be like a college athlete, hopefully getting a scholarship. And after he was pulled, Shari's like, this is his only chance at going to college. Why are you guys doing this to him? And they're like, well, if he gets better mentally, he can go back. And she's like, you really can't do that with sports in high school.
Yeah.
6 months to a year is kind of the whole shebang.
And the thing that stresses me out is Chad, I feel like internally knows something is off and that's why he acts out.
I feel like they broke him harder.
They broke him really hard.
I mean, I think they had to go hard on him because of the way he was acting out. She hears him get on the phone and say, I need to focus on being responsible for myself before I can be responsible to a team.
I think they broke him really hard, but I don't think he has the like shocking awareness that Shari has to process brainwashing as it's happening.
She is really able to recognize inconsistencies in their own propaganda.
And she even was broken for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Like they did get her. I noticed Ruby was beginning to turn on her parents and siblings, confronting difficult memories of her past in ways she never dared before.
Always the poster child for moving forward, she'd spent her life plastering over her childhood wounds with a veneer of perfection and daily phone calls from her mother. Her relationship with her mom bordered on codependency, a fact I'd always found unsettling given my own emotional distance from Ruby. But Jodie's emphasis on ceaseless inventory and inner work cracked that carefully constructed facade. So over a couple years, she starts really trying to hold her family accountable for things that she was upset about with her childhood and holding them accountable for their truths. And anytime they weren't receptive to her inviting them to apologize, she would see it as like a demon in them. And slowly she started to cut herself off.
So within 2 or 3 years, Ruby has cut off her entire family. And now it is Shari's turn to get forced into one-on-one meetings with Jodie. Ruby comes to her and says, you're not emotionally vulnerable. Like, you need to work on yourself in order to become vulnerable with me so that you can someday be a good wife.
One of the interesting, like, Mormon carryovers is that all threats come with, and that means you'll be a bad wife, and that is your purpose on this planet, is to be some man's submissive wife. So that cuts deep.
And then at one point she goes, okay, Shari, the choice is yours. You can do one-on-one counseling with Jodie, or we take away your car, phone, and pull you out of school. You decide.
She says part of her is like, I knew I needed to leave, but where could I have gone? The cold truth was I had nowhere to walk to.
I mean, she starts Googling emancipation. It's so crazy to be like, you have a choice in the matter. You could either work with Jodie or lose all tethers to reality.
So these one-on-one with Jodie are like Control-C, delete your sense of self. I don't know why I said that. I was looking for the word shortcut and I got PC pilled. Anyway, so like she opens up and right away she goes, do you think you're a good person? And she's like, I think so. And she goes, well, everyone can grow. And like the fact that you would even think you are shows what a bad person you are. And she starts giving her all these homework assignments of taking inventory.
So inventory is where you write down all of your distorted thoughts throughout the week.
And because Shari is kind of a perfectionist who likes to do well in school and she does like to be organized, she kind of excels at this. So she would come every week to our weekly one-on-one session and be like, Monday, I jumped to conclusions 3 times. Then I thought in black and white. And then I competed with Sarah and assumed I was better at math than she was. Tuesday, I catastrophized about upcoming presentation. I overgeneralized about my abilities based on 1 grade. And so she is like listing out all of her negative thoughts and being told by Jodie that this proves that you're a horrible person.
And Jodie really concludes based on her own distorted thoughts that she has a problem with self-adulation.
Which means she thinks she's superior. So they need to work on breaking down her sense of self and the parts of herself that she likes. So they're like, what you need to do is balance out your self-adulation with self-denigration. So she says, the next time you identify your adulation, Shari, I invite you to explore its opposite. Think of it as a balancing exercise. So let's say you assume you're going to ace a test because, of course, you think you're so very clever. Change the language in your mind. Flip it. Think to yourself, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail this test because I'm a very stupid little girl. Which is like truly one of the craziest things I've ever heard somebody give advice for.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that your therapist is being like, have you tried more negative self-talk? I've noticed you have confidence.
Shari, be humble. You're far less clever than you think you are. Tell me how that feels. Be honest. And she goes, well, I feel scared, exposed. And Jodie's like, yes, exactly. You feel vulnerable. Vulnerability is what Shari Franke experiences for Shari Franke when she realizes that she is not right about everything. And that, my dear, is what we call living in truth.
So essentially your truth is being absolutely broken emotionally. And she ends up being like, you're so right. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for everything I said about you. I shouldn't have believed the things I've read online. No, we shouldn't, she said, her voice dripping with the satisfaction of a predator who knows she has finally caught her prey.
So because of these one-on-one sessions where she is forced to write down all of her distorted thoughts and then train her brain to think like she gets so consumed by connections thinking.
And self-hatred. It's teaching self-hatred. She actually is growing in her relationship with her mom. Her mom starts being like, I really like you. You're doing so well. We're so proud of your growth. She's being the dutiful daughter that she is supposed to be. And she is losing her friends on the outside.
It's ruining every other relationship in her life, even to her teachers. So she's being mean to her friends because she's trying to force her friends to confront their distorted thoughts and come meet her in truth, which obviously a 17-year-old is not interested in hearing from a fellow 17-year-old about how distorted their crush on a boy is. And then even her teachers, at one point, she doesn't like the book they're reading in class because she thinks it's too easy. And the teacher was like, well, no, I think this is a good book and it's won a lot of awards and it's a good book. And she says, I think you're engaging in emotional reasoning, letting your positive feelings about the chosen cloud your judgment about its suitability for class. Just because you personally find it poignant and well-written doesn't mean it's the ideal choice from an objective educational standpoint. You're worshiping the should without rationally evaluating whether it meets the student's needs, which means your thought process is distorted by unexamined assumptions and an overly adulatory view of a book's merits for this particular purpose. Boom, mic drop, Shari 1, teacher 0. I mean, she really thinks she like won against the teacher because she's bringing Jodie speak to school.
And so she's going home and she's telling her mom about these confrontations she's having with her teachers, with her friends. And her mom is like, wow, that's amazing. Can't you see how all their behavior is a reflection of their distortion? She wasn't comfortable with your questions, even though you were just reflecting truth. My sweet Shari, you're so clever and so brave. She goes, I didn't care if I lost every friend I had, if it meant hearing praise fall from my mother's lips. Finally, Ruby liked me.
It's 2019. The channel is over 2 million subscribers, over 2.5 million subscribers. They have a new house.
They have a giant home where it's 3 floors upstairs. The 4 girls all have bedrooms. Shari has her own bedroom. The parents have the master suite on the main floor. And then in like the basement, there's like a boys' hang for the 2 sons.
And then the pandemic hits. As the pandemic took hold, Ruby continues posting to 8 passengers, but her demeanor had shifted. The channel she'd painstakingly built from the ground up seems to hold less allure than Jodie's Connections venture. So she is more and more allocating all of her resources to Connections and becoming a Connections coach.
And then they get canceled. May 2020, in a video titled What We Haven't Told You, Chad dropped a bomb that would soon detonate our family's carefully curated image. He mentioned casually that he'd been sleeping on a beanbag on the basement floor for 7 whole months. On Jodie's advice, Ruby removed Chad's bedroom privileges as punishment for continued defiance. His options, a pull-out guest bed, an inflatable mattress, or wherever. That wherever became the beanbag in the basement.
The internet freaks the fuck out over Chad sleeping in a beanbag chair. And overall, it just was like the final piece of hay that collapsed the pile.
She already doesn't really care, so she's not scrambling to win these people back over. And what happens is everyone's now curating clips of all the other evidence of Ruby being an insane parent. One of the examples is from the time that they can walk, everybody's responsible for making their own lunch. And at one point, her 6-year-old forgot to bring a lunch. And she like laughs about how the teacher called up Ruby and was like, would you mind bringing her lunch? She's like pretty hungry. And Ruby goes, no, she has to learn about the consequences of her own actions. Like hunger isn't going to kill her, and don't even let the other kids give them their lunch. And they're like, wait, have you been a psychopath this whole time?
And this is such an interesting truth about the way people process things on the internet, where so many things don't click until all of a sudden everything clicks.
Mm-hmm. There's also a scene that goes viral of one of her kids, like her 5-year-old daughter breaks a plate or something. And so she threatens to murder her stuffed animal and decapitate it. And she goes, see, when you murder my things, I murder your things. And everybody's like, yeah, I don't know that your plate and a 5-year-old's favorite stuffed animal are like the same.
But it's so interesting that people are looking back at those moments and being like, oh yeah, we saw that the whole time. She was like being abusive on camera.
Well,
often.
Can I say this? Nobody has 2.5 million followers without some haters, but I wonder if the haters were emboldened now to become the majority.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think if you had always been sus of them, you had probably noticed those things before and not liked it. But like if the overwhelming opinion is positive and they're like, no, they're wholesome. And then there's this switch. And then suddenly the middle people switch.
Yeah. Watching it all unfold, I felt conflicted. Part of me was glad that the others finally saw what I'd known for years, but I was worried if the public shaming would only make Ruby double down on her strict methods. Would the very attention meant to help us end up making things worse? As the backlash intensified, Ruby's rage burned brighter. So Ruby, of course, becomes the victim in this situation, the victim of misunderstanding. And so as Shari feared, she doubles down on her Connections work.
She's like, Jodie said I have to stand in my truth. These are the demons. I have to be an example. You can't succumb to the distortions. The distorted people are people who think you should like love your child.
So that summer, Ruby decides it's going to be a electronics-free summer. So all of their iPods, games, everything got taken away.
They're still in therapy, and Shari is thriving under it. I was earnestly living by Connections rules, almost addicted to my weekly self-flagellation sessions with Jodie.
She was just never getting it right. And Jodie kind of freaks out at her at one point. And she was like, I don't understand what Jodie wanted from me. And Jodie goes, look, it's much easier to point out everyone else's distortions than confront your own, isn't it? If you want to truly grow, you must be willing to look at the ugly parts of your psyche. So she asks some more questions. And Jodie is like, you're obsessed with getting my approval.
She says you have no compassion and empathy. And then ultimately she says something like that she's an obedient little drone.
And she calls her an unfeeling person. So the next week, Shari goes, you're right. I want to say it hurt me when you said those things, but I'm grateful for your honesty. Hearing truth is the only way we can bring about change. And Jodie goes, I never said those things.
Shari's like, yes, you did. And the thing about Shari is she's an excellent student. She's like, I took the notes. Like I wrote down exactly what you were saying to me as you say it. So she goes back to her journal and she's like, yeah, there it is. I wouldn't have written it down if she hadn't said it. And then she's like, what else is she lying to me about? She says, you hallucinated the whole exchange and then you turned your lies into your truth. And she's like, no, I didn't. So then she's like on the lookout for hypocrisy.
I will say it seems like after about 1.5 years of absolute obedience, this one moment kind of shatters because Shari had always been suspicious of Jodie. And then as she started getting these one-on-one sessions and feeling the love of her mother and things like that, she got pretty indoctrinated and it crumbles immediately. Like, it was on a very shaky foundation to begin with. And now she's obsessed with catching these lies that Jodie tells.
And the way that Jodie is allowed to make assumptions and nobody else is. The final straw for me was when Jodie started talking about how babies are distorted. Those tiny innocent bundles of joy with their soft, downy hair and their wide, trusting eyes. According to Jodie, they're manipulators who feel entitled for their mother to come and tend to their every whim. The problem with society today is that we coddle children, she said. We give them everything they want and we wonder why they grow up to be selfish and lazy. And Shari's like, but they're just babies. And she goes, they know what they're doing.
Jodie's eyes glinted with something dark and unsettling. Shari, you think babies don't know how to manipulate, how to get what it wants? I swallowed hard, suddenly dry. I think a baby cries because it needs food or comfort. Jodie waved her hand dismissively.
A baby cries because it's entitled and it knows someone will come running because it believes the world revolves around them and their needs. Unless you train it to not be entitled, you're just reinforcing that behavior in them. It's our job as women and mothers to break that cycle of manipulation, to teach children from an early age that they need to earn their blessings. Only then can we hope to create a society free from distortion.
What the actual, like, this is one of the crazier things we've read.
As I finally started to break free from Jodie's hold on me, I began to ask questions. How had I and so many others been so vulnerable to being manipulated by someone like Jodie?
Shari, it's because your parents forced you into this system and into this cycle, and you were desperate for your own parents' approval like a kid normally is.
Had the emphasis on obedience that I'd grown up with created a follow the leader mentality that made it all too easy to fall under the sway of someone like her who claimed to have special knowledge and the ability to guide us towards righteousness? The fact that she had been so able to easily convince me and my family of her supposed spiritual authority was worrying.
It is worrying, yes.
And then she's like, intelligence is no defense. Look at my dad, a professor, who was shockingly quick to abandon my own judgment in favor of hers. One thing that she maintains in this whole book is like what a brilliant man her dad is. And she's like, if only he hadn't been in this cult, he probably could have saved us from earthquakes. And I'm like, damn, a daddy's love. It is so funny that I'm like, I don't know that I really want him to be a scientist.
It is really upsetting. And I'm not trying to tell her how to feel. She still has a relationship with her father. I hate him.
Yeah.
I really feel that to be a man just like passively sitting on the sidelines while your wife indoctrinates your entire family into this psycho cult where like babies aren't given comfort and like children don't get lunch, that's also evil. Connection starts to kind of fall apart. Jodie is paranoid and freaking out, and she's like a greedy menace. And so she makes all of the other Connections certified leaders sign a contract that says, if you use any Connections knowledge or information anywhere, I get a cut of that money. And they were all like, we're not signing that contract. That's psycho.
We've already paid you all your money and now we have the teachings. The majority of Jodie's followers, finally confronted with the reality of Jodie's boundless greed, balked at these demands, seeing the contract for what it was, a desperate attempt to maintain control and monetize every aspect of the hard-earned skills. One by one, people started walking away from Connections, but her mother didn't. Ruby, of course, didn't. And then not only that, but like Jodie is able to twist the narrative and be like, I had to fire all these people because they were so greedy.
And then also it further emboldens Ruby because she's like, well, I'm the good one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm number one.
So Shari is seeing what's happening and she's about to go to college. And I think she's starting to like stretch her legs and break free, recognizing that hope is on the other side of the summer.
She finds what she believes is a lifeline and a way to earn extra income. There's another guy in the church who's like an old man. He's like
in his late 40s.
An adult man, father, husband.
Derek was a high up in the church, a family man and a landowner in his late 40s.
A landowner?
Landowner.
By
Does he have
George.
donkeys? And does he have a covered wagon? Is his well deep?
With all that land, how many votes does he get?
Anyway, in May 2021, right after I graduated high school, he asked for help with social media for his company. So she starts working for him. And it turns out that he had been Jodie's neighbor. And he's like, we fucking hated her. And this right away gives her a lifeline. She's like, well, here's a guy that fucking gets it. Like, here's somebody I can open up to. He's like a father figure to me, and he hates Jodie Hildebrandt. What more could you want from a man? Oy vey.
At one point, she calls him dad. She's very easy and desperate to find some other people she can call mom or dad. She tries out the title on a real handful.
She just wants a parent. She wants somebody who fucking cares about her. And here's this man who's like Shari, you really impress me. You're really wise. You're good at your job. Your enemies are my enemies.
And so she calls him dad, and then he freaks out and goes, I think we're more than that, aren't we? More than dad?
Sometimes he did say things that felt just slightly off color, remarks bordering on flirtatious, like complimenting my appearance a bit too enthusiastically or letting his gaze linger a moment too long. But she would like brush it off. He would say things like, I'm the only one who really cares about you. You know that, right? And he would send her gifts. And she felt guilty and she felt stressed, but he was her lifeline. So I carried on working with Derek behind everyone's back. And despite the secrecy, it felt nourishing and empowering, having his constant support, someone to lean on. Lord knows I was about to need it more than ever.
Okay, so she's about to go to college. She's about to go to BYU. It's like a 20-minute drive away.
It's also where her dad works. He's a professor there.
2 weeks before she's about to leave for school, her parents go, hey, by the way, you don't have a bedroom anymore. Jodie's going to live there.
Okay, so what's happening with Jodie is she's being bombarded by the adversary. Her soul is under siege from Satan himself, and he is trying to silence her truth.
My mother's unhinged guru was locked in a battle with evil, and her solution was to crash at our place.
Since Shari's the biggest room, she gets Shari's room. I will say this. Having just watched Nosferatu, I was like, okay, I know exactly what was going on here.
Oh my God, that's what I said.
I was like, okay, Lily Ray Depp. What's her name?
Lily Rose Depp.
Lily Rose Depp.
Wait, where was this? Okay, this exact passage. Jodie was in a dark place mentally. Night after night, she'd fall into these mysterious trances, not quite seizures, not quite sleep, but something eerily in between. And I said, oh, she'd promised her soul to Nosferatu.
That's what's so fucked.
Is
everyone thought she knew God, but really she knew a vampire. Oh, spooky stuff. Oh my God, this is so funny. So she had been staying with their family friend Paige, but unfortunately she's in league with Satan now.
Fuck.
I'm going to start saying that about people. Be like, her, she's in league with Satan.
So even Shari has compassion for Jodie being plagued by Satan. She says, get a grip, Shari. Jodie is just a person, a deeply problematic person, but a person nonetheless. If she's suffering, we should help her.
I don't know. You can't help everybody.
So Jodie moves into Shari's room. Shari lives on the couch now. I don't think I've ever seen Ruby happier than when Jodie was living with us, battling entities and riding Charles the Lion.
Oh yeah, Charles the Lion is like taking her to heaven in her night visions. And like he gets referred to like he's like also in the house. Actually, don't laugh at people's religions.
I always laugh at people's religions. It would be actually
fucked up not to.
Equality, Claire.
Ruby soon decided it was best for her to bunk with Jodie so her friend didn't have to suffer through her demonic night terrors alone. Okay, can I tell you this is when I went, wait. Wait. This is when I said, oh my God, is Jodie gay? It wasn't until then. Oh my God. Also, she had all these visions and she had to meticulously record them and they had a binder called pen papers. And she like thought she was going to be the next prophet.
Totally.
The thing is, can I say something?
Why wouldn't she be?
Well, I was just going to say there's no reason not to bank on it. Like, sure, it's a long shot, but if you hit it right, you hit it big. Like that guy in The Big Short.
And then imagine you don't even have the pages written down.
Yeah, how are you supposed to keep people in line?
What's it called? The best
revenge is befriending the new prophet.
Success is time and preparation or something like that. So one night she can't sleep.
She's feeling helpless watching all of this unfold. Dad, who seemed like a shell of his former self, wasn't doing anything to stop it.
I'm sorry, yeah, because your wife is fucking her guru under your own roof.
That's disrespectful. Also, they're like eating like shit, which is like a funny note. I guess all they're eating is Dairy Queen and Dr. Pepper.
One day she went into her room to get a book and her room was bathed in the soft glow of candles. The air was heavy with the scent of lavender and vanilla. A lesbian fuck pad.
Yeah, like a massage room. They're going on girls' trips to like Havasu, very VPR. They're doing shopping trips in Mexico to get stockpiles of drugs because they said that the apocalypse is coming and they want antibiotics, which is like smart.
Yeah.
So apparently there's this book called Visions of Glory, which is like a big doomsday book. And they start reading it and they're taking it very seriously. Kevin found himself increasingly on the outside looking in. He could leave the house when he wanted, but he couldn't return without Ruby's permission. He wasn't allowed to go upstairs. Okay, this really was when I went, oh my God. Oh my God, they're smushing up there. Their coochies are touching. I went, oh my God, she's a lesbian.
Oh my God.
They also weren't allowed to tell anybody that Jodie was there because obviously it would be such a bad look for the cult if the demon was attacking her soul.
Totally.
Can I say something that did make me laugh? She's like, they used ingenious ways of tricking the group. Like they would Zoom call from different rooms and blur their backgrounds. And I'm like, well, that's not, I wouldn't call that genius. I mean, me and Mac used to do that too during the pandemic before I quit my job and nobody at work and we were dating.
I don't know if it's genius or just also like if two people are on a call from the same room.
Yeah. One day she wakes up in the middle of the night and she sees her mom like tightening her robe with her hair a muss and a rouge to the face.
Sneaking out of Jodie's room.
To where though? She was sleeping there. It's so funny. What the hell is going on? It was equal parts fascinating and horrific. Two women who preached truth while living lies, who condemned queerness very publicly in their Connections videos while embodying it privately. In my room, on my bed. Most likely.
Very likely.
And then she like runs into these gay people she knows and she's like, what do you think of Jodie Hildebrand? And they're like, oh, she's closeted.
So then it's time to go to college. After her 2 weeks on the couch, her parents drop her off at Brigham Young University and they just kind of like leave her be. And she
gets so overwhelmed by like the simultaneous like freedom, but also worry for her siblings and what she just left behind that she has a panic attack and she doesn't know where to go. So she ends up driving herself to Derek's. I will say I was reading this in a cafe, like pulling my hair out.
Oh my God.
It was like a horror film.
I kept being like, don't go in there.
So she gets in there and she's having a panic attack. He goes, you know what? I'm going to calm you down. I think skin to skin contact would help you calm down. Can I take your shirt off? She's frozen. She can't speak. And he's just like pawing at her. And she's feeling so fucking sick. She's spent her whole life trying to protect her body. And here is this man and all she can think is, oh my God, I'm sinning. I'm sinning.
I've sinned. I've ruined everything. It felt like a punishment, a divine reckoning for all the ways I've failed, all the ways I've fallen short. I cannot believe how fucking sick. This man needs to be in prison.
In my mind, my frozenness, my inability to move was a sign from God, a punishment for my transgressions. This is the spirit telling me I need to repent, I thought.
Logically, I knew I should keep my distance from Derek, especially after what happened, but there was a traitorous part of me that clung to the attention he gave me. She is so in search of a father figure, like anyone who will just listen to her and show her approval, that she continues to like respond to his constant texts.
Also, he is like creepy and scary and like getting very mad at her. And if she finds out she's somewhere where a boy is, he's yelling at her and being like, you're so mean. I'm the only person who cares about you.
I mean, he insists that she share her location because he's like, if something bad happens to you, I have to be able to find you. So now he's like stalking her fully.
So she goes home a few weeks later to get a book from her house. And she's like, can I go get something from my room? And her dad's like, hey, honey, you can't. You actually have to ask permission from Ruby. And she's like, do you go into my own fucking room? And he's like, yep. So she's like, you know what? I can't be there anymore. I can't see my sad sack of a father in that house where nothing makes sense. So she's like, I'm going back to college. I got to get away. Over Thanksgiving, she really is like, I don't know what to do. At this point, Thanksgiving had become like this sad, weird, insular experience because they used to spend it between the two families. But of course, her mom doesn't speak to her own family anymore. And her dad's parents are like too old to host. So they just spend it alone. And she's like, I can't go back there. And then she finds out that her mom wants to go to Jodie's house for Thanksgiving. And she's like, well, I refuse. I'm not going to fucking Jodie's house. So she goes and spends it alone with her grandparents who are older and really into microwavable food. And she's like, I don't know. It was kind of nice that somebody loves me.
Yeah, her grandparents do love her. And they're like, is everything good? We don't really hear from your family anymore. And she's like, yeah, it's fine.
So for Christmas, she shows back up home. Chad greeted me at the door with a sympathetic look and a whisper. Hey, sis, welcome to hell. The atmosphere in the house was somehow even stranger than I remembered. So they're about to have Christmas, and it's this like weird thing where suddenly like Ruby and Jodie are officially living in that room together. And she's like, oh my God, Jodie really wants to get along with you. It like means so much to her that you guys get along. Let's get dinner at 7. And then at 7, they haven't come down from the room yet. So at 8, Shari's like, well, I'm hungry. I'm making myself spaghetti. And then of course she gets screamed at for being inflexible. And she's like, I actually was flexible. When you guys didn't show up, I just made myself my own dinner. And it's just like very abusive. So they end up going out to their own, like it's just very like bizarre behavior.
It ends with her mom saying, your poor future husband, Shari. I feel sorry for him. Good luck finding a man who wants a selfish wife like you.
And when they come back from dinner, Jodie is like, your fight with your mother reminded me of my daughter and she left me. There's no greater pain than being abandoned, Shari. You can't do that to Ruby. And it really works on Shari. Shari feels really guilty and apologetic.
And Ruby goes, "You're only an invited guest here, Shari. This isn't your home. It's mine. And frankly, I don't want you in it if you're going to talk to me like this." "Then uninvite me," I said, voice sharp. "I'm serious, Mom. Just say the word and I'll walk right out the door." I stood up more than ready to grab my things and leave, but Ruby, true to form, wouldn't let me have the last word. "I can't take this abuse," she wailed. Voice pitched to shatter windows. She bolted for the door, Jodie rushing after her.
So they have Christmas a few days later, and Jodie announces that the youngest siblings won't be receiving any presents this year. "We're teaching them to not be selfish and entitled. Furthermore, they must ask permission before speaking to any of you. If they interrupt, you must reprimand them. This is non-negotiable. We all need to present a united front to correct their behavior." And Shari's like, "Well, that's fucked. I'm not going to get presents if my little baby sister and brother can't." And they scream at her and say that she is part of the problem, that she's keeping them entitled and selfish. And on Christmas, everyone gets gifts and is ordered to open them in front of these poor little kids who aren't allowed to have any gifts. And then the kids have to clean everything up.
And then Shari really struggles with it because she's like, am I becoming my dad? Am I just passively watching as my mom abuses more children?
And she doesn't know what to do, but Jodie ends up right after New Year's leaving and saying she's feeling better now, which leaves Shari being like, okay, are things about to get better or are things about to get way worse? Because now Ruby's going to be heartbroken and who is she going to take it out on?
Meanwhile, she's still being abused regularly by Derek. She doesn't know how to get away from him, basically.
He texts her constantly. He has her location. He's always semi-threatening her. Apparently later, he used to say things like, "I want to be able to protect you. So what I'm going to do is at any given point, I might show up and attack you just to see if you're aware of how to protect yourself." "He was training me for marriage, showing me the things I would need to do in order to please my future husband. Your husband is going to be so disappointed on your wedding night if you're uncomfortable being touched like this. See how you flinch when I do that? You don't want to do that in front of your husband, do you?"
On one hand, his attention made me deeply uncomfortable. On the other, it was the only form of support I had in my tumultuous world. The contradiction tore at me, leaving me paralyzed and unable to act.
As Derek's grip on me got tighter, I felt myself shutting down more and more. I became skittish and secretive. She stops going to the dining hall. She stops leaving her room. Whenever she tries to break up with him, he's really manipulative towards her and she gets scared and backs down.
She thinks about talking to Ruby. I mean, this is all happening because her parents don't give a fuck about her, where she is, what she's doing. She has no one that she can talk to about anything. So one day she texts her mom and she says, "I feel like you don't care about me. You never answer the phone when I call, but I know you're always talking to Jodie. I feel ignored. I feel like you don't love me." For 24 hours, that message just hangs. No response. And finally, her mom says, "I sense a lot of aggression in your text, a lot of resentment. I'm going to invite you to invite me to talk about this with you in person." So she invites her mom to talk about it. And her mom just goes on and on about how selfish Shari is.
Until she finally breaks down crying and is like, "Okay, you're right. I'm sorry." By the time dessert arrived, I was broken, sobbing into my chocolate cake, apologizing for being selfish enough to put them through this ordeal. "Thank you for allowing me to mirror truth to you, Shari," Ruby said, patting my hand as the server dropped the check. "And since you're an adult now, we'd like to invite you to pay for dinner."
So she considers cutting off her entire family, but she just doesn't know what to do because of her youngest siblings. She doesn't want to lose touch with her siblings. She doesn't know how to maintain this balance with her family.
She is catatonic. She's seeing Derek. She's completely dissociating. She doesn't know what to do. She goes, "Deep down, I think I knew what Derek was. He was just another one of them. Just like Ruby and Jodie, he was yet another one of the poisonous adults in my life, sucking the very marrow from my bones."
Finally, her bishop goes, "You need therapy." "Oh, sure," I said, "I've done it before. I like it, but Ruby won't let me." And literally the Mormon church goes, "We'll pay for you to go to therapy."
So she finally gets to talk to a doctor and she's very careful about walking around the situation. She doesn't want to tell how bad it is. And she also doesn't want to talk about Derek. But the doctor is picking up on it and being very supportive. "This sounds hard. Let's just talk about what you're comfortable talking about. Let's take it slow."
And finally, the therapist tells her that what she's experienced is emotional abuse.
"It felt like I was waking up from a long, hazy dream. The fog was lifting and in its place was a blinding, brilliant truth. It wasn't me. It had never been me. The dysfunction, the chaos, it was all Ruby. It always had been." So she starts finding strength in therapy and realizing her mom is the problem. She has to help her siblings. And slowly the Derek of it all starts unwinding. And she's not really open to talking about it, but she can see that this is another symptom of the same problem.
Her family does this photo shoot every year, and she's really realizing more and more how worthless her dad is at this point. Her dad is just kind of there standing beside as her mom continues to throw their family deeper and deeper into dysfunction.
So there's a vacation shortly after that, and it's decided that Kevin and Chad are not allowed to go. The 2 youngest kids aren't allowed to go because they're too selfish. And so Ruby's like, well, I'm not going. I'll just babysit the kids.
Sherry doesn't go.
Oh yeah, sorry. I meant Shari because honestly, Ruby should be the 18-year-old.
Of course.
As always, she gets into a fight with her parents because they promised to pay for her gas to help her, and because she's driving back and forth to school, and then they like yell at her for following up about that and being like, this is why nobody likes you.
So things are starting to break with Kevin. Kevin, the dad, who's been standing by the entire time, is Jodie's new target. She's going to get this guy. So one of Jodie's things is accusing people of like distorted thoughts around sex constantly. If a man hugs his child, he's like, that man's a pervert.
Why else would a father hug a child?
Exactly, because any kid who's needy is just manipulating you.
A part of me pitied her, a repressed, self-loathing, deeply damaged woman trapped in an environment in which she felt compelled to conceal her true nature. Surrounded by women she couldn't have, women who were married to men she resented, in her mind, there was only one path to justice: crush the sperm donors and liberate the females.
Mid-2022, after this family vacation, Kevin calls her and says, your mom has invited me to leave the family home so I can work on myself.
Once I'm better, I'll come back and we can be a happy family again. I'll be gone for about a year. And he goes, I'm leaving. I'm taking Chad. Chad's also selfish and we belong together. Don't call me. Don't text me. And then he goes, by the way, they're separate too. So Chad and the father are completely separated and Shari is not allowed to contact them. That teacher, Mr. Haymond, he like takes her in and basically she goes in there and she's just like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I don't have parents. And they're like, you can crash here as long as you want.
So she starts going to the Haymond's house pretty regularly to have full-blown meltdowns while she's trying to figure out how to handle her family.
And then, of course, when Ruby's like, well, how's it going? Shari's like, I don't know. It's kind of hard to not have a dad anymore. And she goes, well, you're so selfish.
At one point, Ruby moves into a new apartment off campus and they find black mold and she calls her mom to be like, please help me. I don't know what to do. There's mold. And her mom goes, you're 18. Why can't you figure this out?
So she's living with this 26-year-old woman and then this super like Mormon girl. And they're an odd group, but they're sweet and they have no idea what's going on.
Then she finds out that Chad is living like 2 minutes away from her. So she finds out his address and she goes over there to talk to him because she thinks they can commiserate. They can be like, this was really fucked up. How can we save our other siblings? But Chad is still very indoctrinated and he's like, I'm not allowed to talk to you.
Chad laughed. Protection? I'm doing fine, Shari. I'm working 2 jobs and paying my bills. His eyes raked over me, critical and cold. You should worry about yourself. And she's like, why are you so loyal to her? She's our mother, Shari. You should leave, he said, his voice low and final. And with that, he turned and disappeared back into the apartment, slamming the door behind him.
Immediately, she gets a call from Ruby because Chad has told her about the visit. She twisted my actions and painted my attempt to protect Chad as a malicious attack.
So she's basically like, how dare you say this about me? You will not be allowed to see the family. I provide a very important resource in your life, which is keeping the family together, and you cannot have them anymore.
Then in therapy, she finds out about the fawn response in terms of fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. She had never heard of fawning before. Basically, it's appeasement in order to stop an attack. And that's what she's been doing her whole life. It's what she's done with her mom, and it's what she's doing now with Derek. And learning that term helps her like gather the tools she needs to get rid of Derek.
So she's staying at the Haymond's house and he's really being cruel to her, being like, they don't want you there. You're a burden to them. Of course, they tell you that they love you. They're just being polite. They want you to leave. The only person who cares about you is me. And when she learns the spawning term, she's finally able to be like, I have to shut this down with Derek. And she opens up about it in therapy. And she's like, as the session came to a close, I felt a strange mix of vulnerability and relief. Derek's name had finally been spoken in this room. I understood why I couldn't say no to him, why I never rebuked him or showed anger. Some way, somehow, I'd have to figure out how to break it.
So she all of a sudden realizes that Ruby has access to her bank account. So she goes and moves all of her money to a new bank account now that she's 18 years old. And then in an act of retaliation, Ruby sends her a note being like, your car insurance is canceled. So now she has to pay for her own car insurance. But in order to get car insurance, she needs the title to her car. And so she calls Ruby and is like, I need to get that. And Ruby's like, you can get it from Pam. Who the fuck is Pam? Nobody knows. So she asks Mrs. Haymond to come with her to get the car title.
But she's getting nervous. The situation at home had escalated. With Kevin gone and Ruby increasingly absent, I felt a growing sense of dread about my younger siblings' welfare. The final straw came when a neighbor informed me that the children had been left alone for 5 days while Ruby was off doing God knows what with Jodie. I was stunned. 5 days, no adult supervision.
So apparently there's some new law in Utah that got passed in 2018 that redefines neglect. And it basically means that there is no neglect.
There's no such thing as neglect. You're allowed to teach your children to be independent. So when she calls children and protective services, they're not really doing anything. They're like, listen, we just can't break the law. We'll get in trouble. Like, leaving your kids alone for 5 days is well within what she's allowed to do.
Jesus Christ.
But rumors are circulating on Reddit. People are picking up that Kevin and Chad are no longer living with the family. And so she decides to post to Instagram. I know that there are many rumors circulating online about my family. While it is true that I'm not in contact with my immediate family and don't support the extreme beliefs of connections, please remember that this is my real family. Despite good intentions, speculating, rumors, and gossip doesn't help us. I'd like to ask for privacy for me and my family as we work through this very difficult situation. Please know that many are working on this situation, and I hope one day we can be whole again.
That's the thing is, I feel like we're 150 pages removed from when they were internet famous, but it's actually happening the whole time.
I know. I guess like they're still famous because just because you stop posting doesn't mean that people stop wondering.
They also haven't fully stopped posting.
Yeah, she's just posting under, because she's still fully doing like a Connections podcast and posting on the Connections Facebook. So like, if you are obsessed with this family, if anything, they're giving you more than ever.
Yeah.
I knew that by posting this statement, I was effectively burning whatever flimsy bridge might have remained between me and Ruby, but something inside me had shifted. The need to stand up for what I believed and to distance myself from Ruby and Jodie and all that they represented had become stronger than my fear of the consequences.
Now she has to go get her car title after she's posted this statement online, after her mom is aware that she's called DCFS on her. And her mom is obviously there waiting when she goes to Pam's to get the car title. Her mom freaks out on her. But luckily, Mrs. Haymond is there and is like, give us the fucking papers, you psycho. Another thing about the Haymans that is really helpful about them is that they attended a connections class.
Yeah, so they knew what and they were like, this is fucked up. So they know what's going on.
They have this like level of awareness of, if you have been indoctrinated into this, like you are experiencing a really freaky deaky level of brainwashing.
Before she's able to leave, she says, you've always hated me. Ever since you were 5 years old, I could see it in your eyes. The way you looked at me, the way you judged me. You've never appreciated anything I've done for you, all the sacrifices I've made.
That's not true, I choked. I never hated you, Mom. I was just scared of you.
You're like the Romans in the Bible, she said, feeding me vinegar when I'm dying of thirst, crucifying me for your own selfish gains. When you're ready to apologize, really apologize, then maybe we can be a family again. But until then, don't contact me or Kevin or Chad or anyone else in our family because you won't get a response.
And that was the last interaction I ever had with my mother.
Of course, she's like shaking. She's horrified. She's been excommunicated, officially disowned.
It was a pain beyond words, a loss so profound it felt like a physical amputation, like a part of my very soul had been ripped away.
Of course, because of her Instagram story, like the gossip is going strong. People are wondering what happened. She finds comfort in people being like, yeah, your family seems fucking crazy.
She asks Mr. and Mrs. Haymond if she can call them Mom and Dad.
Meanwhile, as I said, Ruby and Jodie have this podcast where they're like, the thing about all babies is that they have the devil in them. And it's not enough to give them welts. You have to watch them cry. Shari is like horrified. She's like, if this is what you're saying publicly on a podcast, then what are you doing to my siblings? She keeps calling DCFS. They keep being like, there's nothing we can do. Her one saving grace is that the neighbors have her number and are keeping her abreast of what's going on. They're leaving food on the balcony for the kids. They're just keeping her abreast of what's happening.
Yeah. And also she is comforted by like the comments on the internet where people are very aware that Ruby and Jodie are psychos.
Yeah. So she gets the update that the kids have been pulled from school. The dog has been thrown away. And they're like, we think it's because she didn't want to give the kids an excuse to leave the house. And Shari is kind of scared. She's assuming that her mom has successfully turned everybody against her. So she doesn't even know if she goes to the house to like physically rescue the kids, if she'll be welcome.
So she calls DCFS again and she talks to a woman named Kelly and they do a whole like debrief. She tells Kelly and a few other investigators everything she knows. And then they call her and they go, yeah, we had to close the case. We just don't have enough hard evidence to do anything.
Neglect is basically no longer a form of abuse for parents of Utah. Good news, parents. Leave them on the porch.
So this is one of the sadder things that happens in this book. At one point, walking through campus, she runs into her dad, who still works where she goes to school. And she just hasn't seen him. As she's been desperately trying to save her siblings, her dad has just been living separately and working at the school.
She wants to grab him and be like, where are your kids? Why don't you care? But she realizes he's like obviously not capable of helping.
Finally, on December 5th, her neighbor says, your mother is packing up the house. I think she's moving. So she goes into overdrive again, trying to figure out a way to like call DCFS again. She's so afraid that if her mom is able to successfully sell the house and move, she will have no way of knowing where her siblings are ever again.
She goes with Mr. Heyman just one last time to get some of her memories. And she's like heartbroken. She's in this house where things are getting packed up. They're trying to move. And there's like photos of her parents getting married. There's her memories. There's her childhood. And she's like not even allowed in the house normally.
At one point, she realizes that she still has other family. She still has aunts. She still has her other grandparents. And when she's thinking this, she gets a DM from one of her aunts being like, by the way, we still love you. And so she starts spending a lot more time with her extended family and like downloading them on what's going on and realizing that there are people on her side and that she's not the crazy one.
Meanwhile, Derek is still like harassing her. My phone buzzed. I glanced down, my heart sinking as I saw the text was from Derek. I wished I could have called Kevin, told him what was happening and asked for his help as my protector. He was right there every day, teaching on the university campus. But it was as if I was invisible. My dad, still the man who held me as a baby, who had taught me how to ride a bike and tie my shoes, could no longer see me. The way I got so fucking Christian Republican, I was like, as a man, it is your fucking duty. I was like, you poor, pathetic excuse for a man.
Protect your women.
I'm like, get a gun. Get a fucking gun. You are a father. You need to get a gun.
Have you considered alpha brain, you pussy?
I really was upset. I really was saying things. I was like, she is just a girl. Every man is evil, and you know that as a fellow evil.
The thing when you write a book, when you put your story into the world, like I get that she and her dad have a relationship. I will never forgive him.
Yeah. I know that like, what is she supposed to have no parents ever? She said, who's like the lesser evil?
Yeah. She needed to have someone to like co-sign for her because she like at one point has to break a lease because she had Derek co-sign an apartment for her. And she was like, fuck, I need a dad, not a rapist. Like, how do I get a dad to co-sign for me and not a rapist to co-sign for me?
Dude, so she's with the Heymans at their house. She's basically living with them now. And she's trying to like get Derek out of her life. And he's bugging her and being like, it's your birthday. I know it is. Like, I know you want me to come over. He has her location. So he shows up in his car with like tons of gifts and just leaves them on the front stoop. And the parents are like, what the fuck is going on? She finally that night goes back to her apartment. And the two girls who are her roommates that she's not that close with, she's like crying. She's telling them it's her birthday. And she finally opens up and tells them what's been happening with Derek. And she's like, I never in my life thought I'd like confide in this super Mormon girl. But she was on my side. And everybody was like, this is horrible.
To my surprise, instead of judgment, I only saw compassion in her eyes. She hugged me tightly and said, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I don't know who this man is, but he sounds like a demon.
So she finally types out, Derek, I'm done. It's over. I want you to leave me alone. And he's like, wow, I guess I was right. You never did care about me. You're a liar.
Dude, what a fucking evil bitch. She also opens up to her bishop about it. And her bishop
is basically like, sorry, I got to tell my boss and see what he thinks. And he's like, yeah, my boss thinks you're a slut. So she loses her temple recommendation, which means for a full month, she's not even allowed to be in the temple. And then when they call the other guy's bishop, they go, he said it didn't happen. I guess she's a liar and he's fine. And he gets to maintain like a position within the church.
Yeah. He was high up in the church after all. Who would take my word over his?
In the end, I decided to change my ward to start fresh with a new bishop and a new community. It would mean worshiping with a different congregation with strangers, but that was okay. My heavenly Father knew the depths of my heart and the strength of my spirit. From now on, in him alone, I would place my trust and no one else. I mean, I will say she walks away and is able to be like, that's actually pretty fucked that I was in pain and you like called me a slut and kicked me out and said he was fine.
Yeah.
And she does have this realization. She goes, you can't really trust it's not as dire as you can't trust another person, but she's like, nobody really speaks for God. You have to trust like his voice in your heart.
Yeah.
So finally in the spring of 2023, she tells Kevin's parents what's been going on and they're like pretty freaked out. They're in their 80s. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And then she has to at one point really confront them because now that they're more in on what's going on, they keep coming to her being like, what's going on? What can we do? And she has to be like, hey, grandma, I'm freaking out too. I've told you everything I know. Stop asking. It hurts me.
So she's like watching all of this true crime. And she's like, I kind of think it was because I felt like I was in a true crime documentary. So I was like, well, what's going to happen to me? And she starts learning about these apocalypse people. And she's like, oh no, that's very my mom. Like she's like recognizing her mom in these like doomsday preppers. And she realizes if we don't do something soon, my siblings are going to die.
Finally, she gets a call from her neighbor saying the police are battering down your front door. So she races home. We're back to where we were in the intro. No one is home.
It turns out that she had taken the 2 youngest kids to Jodie's house and like been holding them there hostage. DCFS had custody of all my siblings except Chad. I still didn't know exactly what Ruby and Jodie had done to the youngest ones. No one really did at that point. I focused on the now and the knowledge that they were finally safe from harm. So they are taken into a 72-hour medical care custody. Jodie and Ruby are arrested. And the first instinct is Kevin is kind of like, I love my wife. She didn't do anything wrong. And Ruby's like, I didn't do anything wrong. And Jodie's like, there's been a huge mistake. You guys didn't mean to arrest me. I'm saving children from the devil.
The space has been very good for me, Kevin said, parroting Jodie and Ruby's manipulative rhetoric. The disconnect between Kevin's calm demeanor and the reality of what was happening was staggering.
She keeps comparing herself to Jesus and Joseph Smith and being like, they were persecuted too. I'm just like Jesus.
Oh, God. Okay, so then she goes once again back to the house to like get important possessions like everyone's passports and just any memories and things that she can take that weren't taken as evidence.
Like her own journals and stuff.
And then her dad freaks out and calls her a burglar.
And he's like, I'm going to call my attorney and the police on you. And she's like, what? This is my home. This is my stuff. So she goes, whatever, just take it. I'll keep the journals.
And she's still going to therapy very heavily. I would need to learn all new tools to recognize and manage my intense emotions if I ever hope to truly reclaim my narrative in my life.
And she very smartly is like, I need to deal with the Derek stuff first because that's just like a small piece of this. She's like, I can't even get into my mom stuff. Let's go backwards.
Yeah. So Ruby and Jodie are both charged with aggravated child abuse. Ruby pled guilty to 4 counts with consecutive sentencing, which means between 4 and 30 years.
But Ruby's defense is essentially that she was brainwashed. Her big line is like, the day I got my freedom was the day the police came and rescued me from Jodie. I had no idea what I was doing. So then Shari is like, no, I have to like convince the courts that she was always abusive. She just found Jodie's model to fit her abuse into. So she actually calls on fans of the YouTube channel and she goes, can you guys send me like a compilation of clips of her being like psychotically abusive pre-Jodie? And oh boy, do they show up.
Yeah, I mean, literally the evidence is on YouTube. It was a breathtaking display of narcissism. So at one point, Ruby calls Chad and Shari happens to be there.
And she like compares herself again to Jesus. And she just is like, this is my lot in life. This is what I have to do as a savior. And she's like, oh my God, what is wrong with you? She said Kevin had moved back into the house permanently. Every night he slept alone in his 2-big bed. The past can't be unwritten. It can only be reckoned with, learned from in one brutal a day at a time. He had been making huge strides mentally and was in therapy, as was I, as we learned to stand side by side again as imperfect partners in recovery from what happened.
It's just so sad to me because you're not partners. He's the dad and you're the baby. Like, you're not imperfect partners. He's like a really neglectful parent.
She says one of the first bonding things they did together is they went out and each got their own cat. And she's like, it's so crazy looking at Muppet at how much I love my cat and thinking like, who could put this cat on YouTube to exploit it? She's like, now that I have a cat, I'm just like, wow, it's really fucked up that you would hate your kids because why would you hate them? Tuesday, February 20th, 2024, the day of my mother's sentencing. She did in fact get sentenced, but she got like 4 to 15 years. So she could be out in as soon as 4.
Her mom is in jail going back to get her degree. And she's like, good for her. She's going to need to figure out a way to support herself once she's out of jail. It could be in the next 4 years. It could be when she's very old.
All I wanted for so long was for the world to just sit up and listen, to understand that Ruby and Jodie needed to be stopped. But once they did, it seemed like people couldn't get enough. Again, thanks to Ruby, our lives were no longer our own. The story had all the ingredients, the beautiful, God-fearing American family turning their rags into riches on YouTube, only to be wrenched apart by a dramatic turn of events featuring demon possession, doomsday prepper cults with a lesbian undertone. I am like, it is a fucking gripping story, man. I couldn't put this book down. But she is talking about like how fucked up it was watching, once again, the pain be exploited by now just by like the news cycle. And she said she was in a documentary where they filmed her watching a 2020 report on it. And she had never actually seen the abuse. She did not know what had happened to her younger siblings. She had not seen them abused. She had not heard what had happened. And so to see it live for the first time on the news while she's being recorded, she found like pretty exploitative and disgusting. She really hated how 2020 did their work. And then I guess Ruby had a journal where she detailed all of the abuse she did to the kids, and that got leaked. And she was like, do you know how fucked it is to have like your biggest trauma out on the internet for people to just watch? For content creators, news outlets, and true crime documentarians alike, the rewards of this emotional economy can be seductive, and the digital and media landscapes remain vast and full of promise, but it is also a wilderness, and I fear we have lost our way.
So eventually she gets a letter from Ruby. It is absurd and narcissistic. And she says, realizing your own mother was incapable of truly seeing you, of loving you, for who you are rather than as an extension of herself is a bitter pill to swallow. But in a strange way, the understanding has also been incredibly liberating. I now know that I could never have been good enough or perfect enough to make Ruby happy or proud.
She's like, a lot of people say narcissism, but actually my mom was a real narcissist. Mic a drop. And then she gets to the epilogue. She has her beautiful cat Muppet who she loves. She's back in school. She's got a Ford Focus.
Hooray.
Derek is being brought before a formal disciplinary council. His calling is stripped away. A small victory, but not enough. And she said, I learned that just because a church leader says something, that doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean it necessarily is coming from God. For the first time in my life, I am genuinely happy. I've emerged from the cocoon of my past and somehow found the light. With the help of my community, endless therapy, and the healing power of mini corn dogs and powdered donuts, I'm slowly stitching my psyche back together.
Powdered what?
Donuts?
Probably just donuts.
Well, look at how it's spelled.
I think there's like 17 ways to spell donuts.
No, not E-T-T-E-S. That's crazy.
Okay.
I think they're donuts.
Okay.
I imagine they're mini.
Yeah, they might be.
And feminine.
Donuts for girls.
There's actually a business idea.
Bitches want nuts too.
But anyway, she's like learning how to honor her grief and never be in front of a camera. She talks a lot about like how she wants to preserve her siblings' dignity and let them tell their own story at their own time. Now that I have peace, this is my promise. Now that I have happiness, this is my purpose, finally. Can I say,
Wow.
what a fucking... I am genuinely so impressed with the way she was able to stand so strong in her sense of self and her convictions and her fight for her siblings. I cannot imagine how helpful it'll be to them to know that somebody was on the outside fighting for them and loving them.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish her all the luck in the world. I think she's going to need it. She's engaged.
Thank goodness.
I think the best thing a woman can do coming out of a situation like that is probably get married immediately.
Totally.
How fertile would you say the soil is?
I mean, how fertile could it be?
I have to say, I finished it before Ashley and calling her and then having her be like, yeah, this YouTube stuff. Yeah, it is crazy. I'm like, no, it's not even about YouTube. It's about the cult. I mean, she said it herself. To have a YouTube Mormon cult book with lesbian undertones.
Crazy.
That's the memoir.
That's a spicy memoir.
That is a spicy memoir. And would you like to have a drink with Shari Franke?
No.
Yeah.
I think she should be left to...
What about a mini donut?
Willing to bet she doesn't drink.
How many mini donuts would
And
you
not
like?
even a hot coffee. Perhaps a Diet Coke from the Utah Soda Bar.
Yeah, I would love to get a dirty diet.
I think she should be left alone. No more questions. If we ran into each other at the soda shop, I would love to exchange a pleasant hello and then a nod of understanding and a moment of, I'm proud of you.
I'm like desperate to know what the old videos were like.
Yeah.
What was it that 2.5 million people were like, I love this? It is so interesting. It does like ask the question, what was Ruby's childhood like? I guess we found out with Jodie. I guess like absolute trauma breeds absolute villains. But I wonder what happened to Ruby. I wonder what happened to like what happened to these people?
Yeah.
Like, was she just born a narcissist or was she like, what happened?
Like, how could you be like that?
Anyway, good luck to Shari. Good luck to the siblings. And good luck to you, our 5-star reviewers.
Thank you so much to Lily Run! ! Oh my God, I'm so proud of you getting those strides in, my paleo. Thank you, SSRSZY. Oh my God, I could use some SSRIs. That's it for this week. Well, love you guys. See you next time.